Chapter 1. Data. I might make a drawing. I might make a car. Sometimes it will just be so far apart. The cheeks remain the same. The chin goes away. The dots will cover most if the red is here to stay. You sent an item our way. If we are able to hoist one, you send 100 of those. Our countries are dense, our people so many. You put them at sites where we don't retaliate. You put them at sites where we think we are not enough, where we feel we are only to follow the commands, where we feel what we feel is not allowed to be felt. We don't express what we feel. We don't react. You take back the success of the hoisting. You make one unit a percentage. You benefit of the density. You benefit of the silence. You spread the item across. Your item passes its course. Was the internet ever freedom? We think it allows us to build our utopia, our free expression, our king. We reveal ourselves in this digital social, in isolation. You might be in one universe. I might have another life. We discover the violence on the streets continues to be the violence on the screen. We are not given freedom to express. We are the body offering contact of our community to a machine. We are a body buying and selling in Second Life. We become a body buying what they are selling in the first. The internet doesn't reach communities who may contradict its system. The internet reaches all communities when they are needed for the electoral. The internet makes us speak its language and doesn't know or perceive ours. Like a prayer in the Catholic Church goes, "O Father, bless us with food, because we only know of creepers." The internet tells us we are not enough. I'm here only to transform you to a number I can read. Chapter 2, Draft. You invite me to see you. I come already. I'm here to share what we need. I'm here to know what you need. I have been living this through. I have been learning this through. Not only me, but all those who came before me. I put together the files. I present you with what is possible, what we need, what language we speak. We don't know of Wiley. We share what we have. You apologize. It was too late, a file. I'm chirpy. I survived. We had all been pushed off to fall. Many fell. Many were blinded. Many unable, as ability is what you make. I'm chirpy. I survived. They put a blanket on me. They fed me a pot of rice. They said they'd hold me. I was brought to the set of movies. It is home, they said. I was provided for. I was to share what I knew. I shared what I knew to many. They fed me. I got lonely. I was not home. My heart was not on me. My home is what fell. I was only what remained. They brought me as the last of us to know, to be the last of us to tell. Confused, I wasn't sure if it had been real. There was nothing that could remind me, other than all that I had shared. If I didn't know it was real, then was it even there?
GPS signal lost. right onto South Figueroa Street.
Chapter 3, Democracy. When the living is too sweet to arrive, and moving forth and back is how we'd sing to the side. The trees will fall, the winds would melt, the screams will surround us. It's either now or now. They don't allow you to mourn, because if you did, you'd know what has been really lost. What would you really stand up against? The many chances. It's your time, now. What are the words? What are the stories? What is it that we will find power with? Are these relations where we avoid engaging after we have tried several times and failed? Is it just moments when we freeze and try to find what is safe? They act so fast and repeatedly that they don't allow you to mourn. Because if you did, you'd know what has been really lost. She has won. She makes a call to join the circular hall. As the experience isn't enough, they join the supporting body. She is now proud. The term passes. She invites again. They don't return. As the violence is not only in the gender, the violence is in the architecture as well. The violence has passed on to chairs and the streets. She has won. She has the bag and the shawl. She is strong. We all feel the power. She is shamed as it is she. We all fail her. We think of codependency. She is not for a leader. She is not for the chair. She fails. And we are further away. We need her, but she seems too frail. We need her, but she seems too frail. वह आज़ादी कैसी जब दोस्त अपने घरों में कैदी बने हों, वह आज़ादी कैसी जब हम हमारे हक न समझ सकें। वह आज़ादी कैसी जो हमें मंजूर न हो। वह आज़ादी कैसी जो वार के लिए जाए। वह आज़ादी कैसी जब हम सम्मान न समझ पाएं। वह आज़ादी कैसी जो केवल शब्दों में रखी जाए। जो हमें जुल्मी कहे, जो हमें अधर्मी कहे, जो कहे है न अब तुम्हारा यह हिंदुस्तान। जहां न हो यह घर तुम्हारा और बाहर जाने में हो केवल अपमान। वह आज़ादी हमें मंजूर न है, तुम मानो या मानो मेहरबान। What kind of freedom when we are prisoners in our own homes? What kind of freedom when we don't even know our rights? We don't accept such freedom. What kind of freedom when it's won by war? What kind of freedom when there is no respect? What kind of freedom which is only written in words that calls us criminals, that calls us anti-communion, that tells us that this country isn't ours anymore, that we don't have a home here, and only insults when we step out. We don't accept such freedom. We don't accept such freedom. Believe it or don't.
I want to see millions, oh. I want to see a billion, oh. Cause waiting I don't see very hard, oh. And I get people, many outside, them just they pray for a blessing. But police come with finessing, them want to teach us a lesson. And we got them to feel my shut. It's your mouth to do too tough. Remember when I tell you to lock up, but you want to be pump us. Oh my shut up. It's your mouth to do too tough. Remember when I tell you to lock up, now see what you done us. Wahala, wahala, wahala be like ATM, e no dey gree dispensary. Wahala be like industry, monkey dey walk back, dey drive. Say make we no talk when the chips are down. Walk, shut up. They no fit try till thy kingdom come. So shut. It's your mouth to do too tough. Remember when I tell you to lock up, but you want to be pump us. Oh, shut up. It's your mouth to do too tough. Remember when I tell you to lock up, now see what you done us. Wahala, wahala, I say wahala, wahala, wahala. We no go see am, we no go see am. I see my people suffer, them no deserve am, them no deserve am. I say wahala, 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 wahala. It's still dey scatter, it's still dey scatter. I see my people suffer, wahala, wahala. We no go see am.
Chapter 4, Diaspora. Today, I want to write a poem. Mind you, when I say today, it isn't the date that matters. Today is the present that matters. I want to speak to you as a person who comes from a community where we have been manipulated to be allies to Hinduism, even though we don't fit within or are Hindu enough. So our men don't get opportunities to be twice born. I want you to keep your Hinduism to yourself, because you have been able to manipulate your women to think you are protecting them, worshipping their feet. You don't protect them with their own agency and their need. You protect to only be pure enough for yourself to feast. I want you to keep your Hinduism to yourself, because you reach out to my community of trans people and convince them that they are the ones who are believers of Ram. While we all waited outside the forest for him to return, while even he forgot to acknowledge us and only addressed the man and woman. I want you to keep your Hinduism to yourself, because you think having right to fuck your cis partner is the only right we need. Because you think the marriage will lead the way to our safety. It will when it is Hindu. It will when it's upper caste. It will when it is the same caste. I want you to keep your Hinduism to yourself, because I don't need you to tell me who to love, where to love, and when to love. I don't need you to tell me I am not good enough. The way you show and win points of the upper caste Hindu women is when you tell a Muslim man that he is wrong. Not because he is an abuser. He is wrong because he touched a Hindu woman, and a Hindu man would not do that. You tell him, not because he is an abuser, but that he is not Hindu enough. I want you to keep your Hinduism to yourself, because I am not your Hindu, and I do not want to be your Hindu again.
If it is the distance that protects you, know that the war is just here. If it is nostalgia that defines your homeland, know that you are old and the believers are also murderers. When you told us that violence won't repeat itself, I am sure you thought it is true. I am sure you are also taken aback by what we have arrived at. I am with you. Are you with me? If love isn't an easy feeling, what makes hate so light? If compassion hasn't been defined, what makes you fight? You made us read things you believed in. What makes it so difficult to hear? Our body isn't definite or shivers from the same fear. It feels like we are together tied to a tree, being beaten and shamed. And the only way to escape from this pain is by uprooting the tree together. I'm with you. Are you with me? If you think they would protect you, that they are fighting for you, know that it isn't true. The supremacy has always been of one kind, and the ways are also similar, you'll find. The only people who make it in the end are neither me nor you. We are not trying to hurt you. Believe us, we have lost everything. We believe we have some kind of power. The only power is in me trying to make you believe me. As anyone who picks up guns, even for good, is dead. Maybe it's okay to die. But since we are living for a moment, let it be about togetherness and respecting differences, justice and dignity. Two things too many. I am with you. Are you with me?
Thank you so much, Fidesha, for energizing the space with your performance. It's been so wonderful to have you participate in the last 3 days of presentations here at the Gorky. And I'm also so happy to see people in the audience who've joined us for all 3 days. Um, over Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we've had presentations of the curatorial Aligning the Uncertain, looking back at the series Allies for the Uncertain Futures that was initiated by me, Shaunak Mehbubani, in 2017, along with some of the key artists of the series, including Vidisha Fedesha, who we saw today, Sarah Nakwi, Akithami, Vishal Kumar Swami, and others. We reflected on the nuances of building solidarities in a fascist land. Vidisha, with her practice from the last 15 years, has constantly challenged the environments, systems, and institutions that they have lived in. and practiced and been invited to practice within. Speaking from very strong lived experiences, they have brought in questions around queerness, transness, caste, neurodivergence, and disability to the Indian art scene, where these conversations have been missing and continue to be blindsided. Community sits strongly at their work, and it's this formation of critical communities, of future thinking communities, that is now giving us hope within the Indian arts ecosystem and the spots that they travel to. Continuing our thoughts yesterday about building communities, I want to invite Fedesha to speak a little bit about their ongoing project, Party Office, that exists at satellite locations and will next be shown at Documenta 15. Fedesha.
Hello.
Thank you so much for again coming for all these last 3 days. If I'm too fast, you can ask me to slow down. And thank you, Shaunak, for inviting me and always believing in me. And thank you, Ken Singh, for also having a wonderful read of what my work is and investing your time in it. And yes, thank you everyone for making this happen. And so many of my friends who are here in the audience. So I run Party Office. We're just gonna go through some of the slides. For a successful revolution, it is not enough that there is discontent. What is required is a profound and thorough conviction of the justice, necessity, and importance of political and social rights. A lot of my work takes from the learnings and teachings of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who's the anti-caste polymath and also the one who's written the Constitution of India. I also learn from other anti-caste leaders, Savitribai Phule and Jyotiba Phule, Periyar, and a lot of other activists who we are also going to see. I'm going to explain in a few things. Okay, so party is a political group with certain ideologies and agendas. Party is an act which seems to be only a leisure activity, rather becomes a site for building relationships, friendships, thinking together, and to be able to do nothing in a safe company. Office is a place of work. It is an architecture where one work is performed. Office here is interested to deconstruct gendered organizational methods, to reconsider how we approach work, and occupation through queer anarchist positions. So party office is also a commonly used term for offices which are in South Asia, for offices of political parties. So that's where the term takes from. So I think party office opens at a moment where as a generation we don't relate to or have any association to our present political parties, then making a social and cultural space which we can support and approach in working towards building future publics, which are critical, supporting, and care for one another. Do you want me to go back to the previous slide? Because I only read a part of it. let me know when I can move on. So the image that you are seeing on the side is from so another activist writer who I collaborate with is Jyotsna Siddharth, um, and their family used to run this newspaper called Abhimukh Nayak, and it was one of the only kind of reader that was coming out in Hindi, because a lot of anti-caste readings and writings come out in Marathi, which is a different part of India. And yeah, so we are also been working on the archives of that newspaper. It ran for 25 years from the 90s. And yeah, so this is an image from there. So party office is actually just kind of, in terms of location or in terms of grounding where we find it, it's a home. And so if you see, we think around the idea of kink a lot as one of the methodologies that party office works with. And the party office space has like kind of multifunctional furniture, and things kind of change around depending on what is being done in the space. The people who are sitting in the living room actually come from multiple generations of anti-caste, indigenous rights, different movements. So the person who you see at what's happening? Okay. The person who you see entering from the door is Jyotiba Phule, who's one of the first anti-caste activists in India, who was also the one who, along with Savitribai Phule, who's sitting on the table, she is the first women's teacher. She was one of the first women to they kind of work towards education for women. They are the ones who first brought education for women. There's B.R. Ambedkar, who's standing in the blue suit and a red tie. There is Periyar, who's they're from the same generation. Of Jyotiba and Savitri are 100 years ago. Then there is Bisra, who is the Adivasi activist. There is Phulan Devi, and there is Fatima Sheikh. So Fatima Sheikh is from the same generation as Savitri Bai. So anyway, that's so it's also these different intersections that when we are setting up satellite locations of party office, that we bring them together as a place of kind of critical conversations, but also space for kind of community and care through different ways. That's the place. That is me. I'm going to introduce some of the projects that we have previously worked with. As I initially shared, that party office is interested in speaking of the commons through intersectional, dialogues and conversations. Party office started in early 2020, and right after the opening, the COVID lockdown happened. And then it kind of became more of a conceptual architecture rather than just a kind of something that is located in a space. And a lot of things started to happen online. Party office does not take any grants from any sort of art institutions within India, because all of them are mostly right-wing. And we are unapologetically not right-wing. So one of the things is the idea of looking at constitution and constitution as commons. Do you want me to read it? Or it's okay? Should I read it? Okay. Party office and after party collective invite artists, organizers, kingsters to think about the relations of the social strictures and the constitution. We think about our positionality, desires, and their relations to the constitutional and legal systems we get placed within, and if they affirm us or not. Participants are from different global locations doing anti-racism work, anti-caste work, organizing and thinking of indigenous rights, trans rights, feminisms, BDSM, sex work, and more. The publication pushes to articulate these relations through the subjectivities of kink. After Party Collective is formed, is a collaboration between Shaunak Mehbubani, who's here, and myself, and operates as a performance and a curatorial collective, which is primarily foregrounding and creating spaces, affirmative spaces for trans, intersex, non-binary, and other gender deviant bodies. The image you see is by Tiana Nakia Medlodden. So this is a project that we do in collaboration with the Millet Kitchen, which looks at millet as a grain. So India primarily had millet as its grain source, which I think is very common for a lot of other countries as well. But wheat and rice kind of got brought in through colonialism and different sort of capitalist propositions. So soil to soil basically looks at basically having a resource which are ethical resources, and then eventually kind of going into compost or like back to the soil. I don't want to explain the image because I think it's there. Then another thing that we also do is that we have annual archiving fellowship. So in the last 2 years, they've primarily been given for anti-caste work. In 2020-21, it was given to a cultural organization called Samta Kala Manch for archiving the Elgar Parishad. And it's also really interesting for us because, oh, where did it go? Anyway. So what's interesting here is that when you are speaking for communities who've never, don't have similar access to education, don't have similar access to kind of knowledge frameworks that we are able to understand. So what it does is that it challenges, and also you are working with communities who are constantly told that you are not enough because you don't know the same language that I speak, you are not enough because you don't know the same kind of technology. So I think one of the things that this publication also does is challenges what is an archive. And so we have essays written by people who walked through several villages, 400 villages, to gather people towards organizing, and it also took us like 2 months to actually be able to share, to be able to actually make people believe that what you have to say is important. And then they're like, okay, is my story even important? That took a period of time. And then it was like, oh, how do I write my story? So then, because I'm not enough in terms of the mediums that I know. So like, oh, the Excel needs to be the medium for the archive, or like something like some cataloging or tagging needs to be the medium of the archive. But they just kind of wrote about their experiences, and so we are publishing something. So most of these publications are also what you're going to see at Documenta. That's why I'm sharing them. So it's been written in 2 different languages. So yeah, I'm basically kind of coming to a point where that you can frame it in whatever sort of language or format that you like. And most of the people actually wrote essays, and the essays were as long as 6,000 words. So it was a process, and I think that's really important for us because we are primarily working with people with lived experiences, not representatives of something or the other. We have a thing called Party Office Hours, which will also be at Documenta, where performances and talks are hosted. Again, these are primarily things where we are foregrounding lived experiences of people who are coming from communities that have been marginalized. As party office, we've also thrown like digital raves. So, like Shaunak was saying, that we also, it's not only that it's located in Delhi, it also primarily has operated at satellite locations. One of the curatorials that was for Party Office in Sydney in 2020 was called Burn All the Books That Call You the Unknown. Um, Basically, Ambedkar says that so Periyar says that we should burn the Manusmriti. Manusmriti is the one which introduces the caste system into the South Asian society. So that you burn the Manusmriti. And Ambedkar, who's written the constitution, says that if it does not work for my people, I would also be willing to burn it. And then, as party office, we propose that burn all the books that call you the unknown, which also, yeah, which I think as trans people, as people who are coming by, been marginalized within our own countries by the post-colonial theorists who are coming from upper caste, and their ancestors have basically always isolated us from the mainstream or oppressed us. And then this is a work called Quirkaholic Anonymous, which was also a part of the installation at Sydney. This is how the party office space got created, which had public programs, which had an archive, which Shaunak and I kind of did an open call for and curated again, called the Queer Futures Archive. Yes. So for Documenta, the curatorial for party office is Queer Time, Kinships and Architectures, which again has a video work called, which is the second part of the video work which was shown in Sydney. The work in Sydney was called Quirkaholic Anonymous 1, and this is Quirkaholic Anonymous 2. This is an intervention, a message from that space in the margin that is a site of creativity and power, that inclusive space where we recover ourselves, where we move in solidarity to erase the category colonized, colonizer. Marginality as a site of resistance. Enter that space. Let us meet there. Enter that space. We greet you as liberators. The acknowledgement of social hegemony carries the ghost of its antithesis, social care. Bodies in proximity perform the nurturance of queer kinships and care as a pivotal form of labor. This exploration draws from Marlon Bailey's perspectives on queer labor while writing about the Detroit black queer ballroom scene. In part, this expansion of the concept of labor reflects how creating culture, family and language, gender, and community requires constant and strenuous work, labor. How do we respond to multiple proximities with one another, mutating across mental and physical states of wellness? How do action and body movement create exchange, care, and familiarity for each other? Again, there's Path Archive, there is a dance, like there's a space which has been created for a party, but also different public programming, again taking form as the initial Delhi party office space, which becomes a multifunction space. We also have something called the Quirkaholic Anonymous, which is a weekly thing, which is primarily a space for trans, black people of color, and people with disabilities. That's all that I have to give. Okay.
Thank you for sharing that. It's been a really exciting 2, almost touching 3 years since Party Office officially was started, but I also know that um, it's been forming in your thoughts and in your curatorial for much longer than that. Um, as well as this multiple ideas of creating community that are at the core of this endeavor. And I thought we might touch upon some of those ideas of community before also opening up to thoughts and questions from the audience here. I wanted to think about 2 ideas of community that you speak about. One of them is this idea of peers who who grow old together, and of uh, creating peer networks where we are able to learn and take each other forward, and to think about the nuances um, of moments when there are disagreement, or when there needs to be a clarification of certain kinds of politics. And the second idea is that of the need for exclusive communities, exclusive spaces that really are only meant for a certain kind of people that have not found space or are discriminated from space in other sites. Um, and you bring in both of these into different kinds of work that you do. So maybe I'd love to just thinking also in line with yesterday's conversation about the idea of alignments, about ideas um, of building solidarity in times of agency, of making work in times of urgency. Um, I'd love for you to speak about some of these thoughts that come into your practice.
Thank you. I think I'm going to answer the first thing, or second thing first. One is that for me, I feel that as people who are systemically marginalized through different urban structures, through structures of race and access, um, it's really important for us to understand that we are on the edges, or we are marginalized because we are thinking of the oppressor as the center. But the moment we think of ourselves as the center, that's exactly where radical work can happen. That's exactly where we start to care about ourselves and make space for ourselves versus responding to those who are marginalizing us. And that's something that I think of as as a radical voice, as a radical figure. Um, so I so I don't use marginalized bodies. I use radical figures um, as kind of the position. Um, and so when I think of exclusive communities or exclusive spaces, I think of having spaces where the radical figures feel safe, where it also becomes moment for our own expression of ease rather than constantly talking about pain for those who are oppressing us. So, yeah, I think that's important. Uh, and yeah, so that is the idea of like the safe community. I think one of the other things for me is that I feel that art tends to constantly operate in isolation. I don't think any artist or curators or art institutions take accountability for things that they are proposing, uh, in the sense that I feel, and that's exactly why I engage with nightlife, because there every week. We are literally throwing 3 events where many people we don't know are constantly coming to these places. Many people we know are constantly coming to these places. So I think you are always navigating pluralities of ideologies, pluralities of access, and pluralities of privileges. So then how are you able to create a space where nobody's safe, right? But how everybody is able to gather together in that space. And I absolutely think one of the big things at the moment is that there has to be space for plurality. Because when we are only saying that I'm only going to hang out with this somebody who is exactly like me, what we are doing is that we are playing the same politics of assimilation. We are playing the same politics of homogeneity, which is also how right wing works, right? So I think that's really important in. And I think one of the things is that, okay, if there's a problematic person within your space, we have to obviously ask for accountability. But I also feel that it's really important to understand that accountability is not a punishment. Accountability is an act of care for me thinking that I feel that you might be able to think differently and therefore be able to see me, and we could be in the same we could share the same space. So I think these are just some things which have really been twisted in contemporary language and culture. Okay. Can we have more lights on the audience actually? Can the
Love
audience
to see pretty faces in the audience. Yeah, I have a bit more, few more thoughts to ask, but in terms of time, maybe we'll open it up for a few questions, and then I'll sneak in some more. Do we have something coming in from the audience? One of the another thing that that I find super important that you propose is the idea of people who are working and speaking from lived experience.
Yeah.
And the centering of those voices that really that have gathered and continuously deal with certain kind of lived experiences. And like you said, Party Office has also really made it a focus to give opportunities, resources, also hire people who come from certain experiences. And I also want to ask, how is this going to translate into the space that is being created at Documenta?
Okay. Um, One of the things that I've recently been thinking is that, like, that party office is not necessarily a permanent kind of an architecture, which means that it sets up at temporary locations, which also means that people who are working with it are also different groups of people, right? And so it allows for that kind of an agency. One of the things that I also tell another collaborator of ours, Shaunak's also one of the co-curators for the party office space that is being created, which is going to have public programs, publications, kink parties, king and play parties, and also raves. So I think how it's going to happen is one of the core things which, because I was not able to explain the position of all the people that party office has commissioned and engaged with, they're all coming from mostly Dalit communities, trans communities, and they are black people, also indigenous people from Australia, or like activists. So that's the only people we've actually worked with. In terms of when we hire people, those are also the only people that we hire. But also kind of religious minority is also a really important thing. So that's literally the only people. And one of the other things is that we always pay which is not a common practice when it comes to the Indian art world. So at Documenta, we are also, for the DJs that we are calling for our parties, are primarily black people of color and trans folks and queer folks. Um, we are working with a collective here in Berlin, which is primarily the people who moved from Syria. We are opening parties with Juliana Huxtable and Jasmine Infinity, who are basically black trans artists. So yeah, I think it's also programming. It's also in terms of other people that we are inviting. So that's what we call party office hours, right? It's like talks and performances are called party office hours. And yeah, in terms of people we are inviting are all like lot of people from the Dalit community, a lot of people from who are from the black, who are black people. Um, yeah, I think it's. I think that position doesn't change. So you can locate party office wherever you want to locate, but that position, which is a political position, does not change. Um, so we are also trying to work with some local people.
Do you want to give our friends here a little preview of some of the people that we're really excited about? Perhaps Grace, Vanu,
Okay.
and Omon Blank.
Okay.
Yeah, just little
Uh, so
This is not announced, hot off the press, just for y'all.
So we are inviting a Dalit trans activist and the first, yeah, Dalit trans engineer as well, a technologist, who is based in south of India, and she's the one who's fighting against the Union of India uh, through by the uh, of the against the act that the Union of India has passed as the Trans Rights Protections Act, which is totally a mess. um, she is also somebody who worked with the a local administration in a small village in Tamil Nadu, uh, where she kind of worked with the government and established a cooperative society where they got housing, ownership, and land rights for 30 trans people who are coming from these rural areas, for whom the primary occupation was obviously sex work and begging, because that's exactly how communities are able to survive when it comes to trans communities. And um, so the cooperative society is not just housing rights, but it also has a dairy, where, yeah, it becomes a source of livelihood. Mm, yeah.
Yeah, I remember when we were speaking with her 1 year after the project was started, and the group of women had stayed there for 1 year. We were interviewing Grace and asking her about how it's going and whether they're having a celebration. And she said, no, 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 there's going to be no celebration because we're investing all our money back. They're all so excited to be entrepreneurs and continue really building this thing that has started up. So we're really excited for Grace to come to Germany and share some of these stories over here, um, alongside um, alongside people who work also at intersections of art and activism and organizing. And I think that's really the space of work that's been super exciting for us, those who step out of um, sort of disciplinary boundaries, but really um, blurring some of these multiple affects that are needed to produce a long-lasting transformation.
Yeah, I think, I mean, when I say queer time, kinships, and architectures, obviously we are looking at time as an industrial complex, which also in some manner controls us, which is looking at obviously the questions of disability and queerness. And um, one of the things for me also is this idea of looking at rest and leisure, that it's really important for radical bodies to rest and leisure, but we also have to understand that in that moment of rest, we are also it also helps us build.
Okay, I found this on the web for Afghanistan.
I think the sound version of a photo bomb.
um I don't know what I was saying. Yeah, I was just saying
Rest
that.
and leisure.
Yeah, that I was just saying that even when people are resting, um, that's what Alcoholic Anonymous also is. That when people are resting doesn't mean that we are not working, because I feel that protest is not a thing of urgency. Protest is something that you do as a practice, which is also something that you see in Anna Einstein's video, where one is saying that it's a continuous action. It's not an action as a response to an urgent situation. And I feel that this urgent situation of protesting on the streets kind of also is a ableist thing. And also, like kind of checking that who's on the street and therefore aligned, and who's not on the street and therefore not an ally. I think that is bullshit. I'm sorry. And I think that's extremely ableist to think that. And um, yeah, that I think resistance is not, it's not a show off thing, it's a continuous practice. If I believe in consent, I only can't do it for 8 hours a day. It's something that I do for 24 hours a day. Yeah. Anything else?
I think we're almost out of time. If you don't have any questions from the audience, then
Max,
yes.
Will, well, friends.
First of all, thank you so much for the 3 days of panels and performances. That was really inspiring. I really wanted to ask you, within those 3 years doing the events and all of the work that Party Office has been doing, what are the challenges that you found by holding an intersectional? I mean, when we talk about the far right or the right, they have a very specific project, they have a very specific plan. And when we talk about plurality, it's a lot more challenging to deal with a lot more stories, a lot more narratives, a lot different problems. What are the challenges that you faced, and how did you overcome them? How did you learn? Okay, like so this happened. How can I actually make a safer space for all of those people, or how can I continue this and make it thrive, and still accommodate the plurality of the folks who you're dealing with in your work?
Yeah, I think listening becomes an important thing. I think listening, which means also that you're not giving a feedback, you're just listening. Um, and I feel that is a very important thing, because I feel that people might mean well sometimes, but they are just speaking out of turn. Like in case of yesterday, when the person was upset that images of Hottentot Venus were being Sarah were being displayed explicitly on the screens here. They said it was a white person who said that you can't show these images because they are we are very discomforted by it. So I think at that moment it was a silencing of a black woman by a white person. Um, and that's what it appeared to everybody in the audience, right? Um, but then when I went and spoke to them, they told me that they were speaking for the 10 other black people who had come with them, who actually came from South Africa. This person said that they have a research in images and representation, and therefore they didn't understand it. So it was not, it was this kind of a white savior action versus actually a racist action. And I think that can only happen, and you can only understand that if you give a space to listen to why that person do it. Because we tend to always be like, I think this is also just something that I've learned from the Me Too thing and the kind of cancel culture or even feminism, right? Where the white women just made feminism as if it's about gender pay gap, or like it was so influenced by communism. And but feminism wasn't about women over men. Feminism is against sexism, which means that we are also against one, the kind of conformity of femininity, and one conformity of masculinity. And I think we have to understand the roots of this. And like, and now you'll see a lot of white women just going like, I hate cancel culture, this is blah blah blah. I don't give a shit, because you actually co-opted something which was not made for you. You are somebody who are going to send people to the cops as people who are coming from communities who are constantly just targeted and arrested and sent to prisons without actually having any kind of like criminal offense. Those communities are never going to believe in the cop, and that's exactly why we don't believe in the idea of due process. And that's why we then look at collective care. Yes, and a lot of people who were called out during Me Too, of course, they were celebrities, but also very young 20-year-old people. And I think it's really responsibility of friends and community. You can't criminalize people. And I feel this idea of like believing in rights or believing in the state is kind of also gives state the power to give you rights, and gives state the power when to also criminalize you. And asking for rights from the state means that you actually believe in the prison system. So yeah, I think it's about listening as a way of making space or understanding. Also, just coming from a thing that I don't actually know enough. And yeah, I will continue to learn. Did that answer anything? Okay.
And then Senate.
One question. Bill's one question.
Okay, last question.
Thank you for this really generous performance and presentation and program. Um, your work is very like varied, and I wanted to ask you about how do you manage the friction between the work that you do that's a bit more like activism, the work for yourself, and obviously your artwork, or maybe like what have you learned from trying to manage this friction, because it's a lot.
I think one of the things with activism is that when people collect within activist spaces, they are collecting towards some kind of a law. And law itself doesn't really think of multiplicity. Law is very specific. Oh, this is about privacy, this is about language, this is about whatever, air, right to breathe, fresh air, or like right to livelihood. And I feel that a lot of activist collectivity is around. So when you look at thinking of queer rights, why it primarily becomes a movement of against homosexuality, LGBT as a movement towards homosexuality, not necessarily looking at transness. So I think that's the difference between participating in an activist space, because we are just countering literally a law itself. But within an art space, I think we can address intersectionality. But that's exactly why I think of the form of poetry as being able to do that where we can talk about many multiple things. Um, yeah, I mean, I think for me, arts. I mean, I think I don't even know what's an activist anymore. Like, because I feel again, it's like you ally to this person, you ally to this person, you suck up to this person, and therefore you're allowed. There's some kind of like, I don't know. I don't think it's really a space for people who are coming from multiple identity positions. Did I answer it?
Thank you.
Lucia is asking us to leave.
Um, we can continue some of these discussions in the foyer outside. But we'll make way for setup for the next performance. Thank you so much, Fadesha. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to all of the artists over the last 2 days who also joined us, even though they're not here. But thank you to the artists for generating these ideas and challenging us constantly. Thank you.